Sometimes life throws you a curveball, and other times it throws you an entire baseball stadium. I'm talking about the kind of situation that makes you question everything you thought you knew about karma, justice, and the sheer audacity of some people. I still wake up in a cold sweat thinking about it, and honestly, I'm still not sure if I was the hero or the villain in my own story. But before I dive into the absolute madness that unfolded, tell me, would you have done what I did to protect your art, your passion, and your very soul from being twisted into something unrecognizable? Would you have gone to war to save the integrity of storytelling itself? It all started subtly enough, with a few comments here and there. I had been working as a scriptwriter for Dhar Mann Studios for almost 5 years at that point. 5 years of late nights, endless rewrites, and the constant pressure to churn out morally charged narratives, each with a clear hero, a clear villain, and a lesson learned. It was a formula that worked, undeniably. The videos racked up millions of views, and I, along with the rest of the team, felt a strange sense of pride in contributing to something that, at its core, aimed to teach valuable life lessons. Or so I thought. My journey to Dhar Mann Studios wasn't a straightforward one. I grew up an avid reader, devouring books like they were the last meal on earth. Storytelling was in my blood. I wrote short stories in elementary school, joined the creative writing club in high school, and eventually pursued a degree in screenwriting. I dreamed of crafting intricate narratives, of characters with moral ambiguities, of stories that challenge viewers to think, not just to consume a predigested moral. But the industry is tough, and after a few years of struggling, the opportunity at Dhar Mann Studios presented itself. It wasn't my dream, no, but it was a chance to write, to be part of a creative team, and to make a living doing what I loved, even if it was within a very specific, somewhat rigid framework. I learned to love the challenge of fitting complex human emotions into neat, digestible packages. I became adept at crafting scenarios that resonated with a broad audience, always ensuring the moral lesson was crystal clear by the end. I prided myself on my ability to find the human element, even within the confines of the Dhar Mann formula. The studio itself was a whirlwind of activity. There were daily brainstorming sessions, rapid-fire approvals, and the constant pressure of deadlines. Dhar, of course, was the driving force. He was charismatic, driven, and had an uncanny ability to spot a viral story. He was also incredibly hands-on, often providing feedback directly on my scripts, sometimes even rewriting entire sections himself. At first, I admired his vision and his unwavering commitment to his message. He always emphasized the importance of teaching kindness, empathy, and resilience. I genuinely believed we were doing good work. The first hint of trouble came in the form of a minor character change. I had written a script about a struggling artist who learns the value of perseverance when his art is stolen. The thief, a young woman from a disadvantaged background, ultimately returns the art after realizing her mistake, driven by a moment of genuine remorse. Dhar liked the story but suggested a change. The thief shouldn't be remorseful. She should return the art only because she's caught on camera and fears legal repercussions. Her motivation, he explained, needed to be purely self-serving, making the artist's act of forgiveness even more impactful. I argued that it would make the thief less relatable, that genuine remorse would add depth. He dismissed it with a wave of his hand, saying, "People want to see clear good and clear bad. Ambiguity confuses them." I grudgingly made the change, telling myself it was a minor tweak. Then came the villain escalation. Slowly but surely, the villains in our stories began to lose any semblance of humanity. They became caricatures of greed, selfishness, and cruelty. Their motivations were no longer complex or understandable. They were simply evil for evil's sake. And the punishments they received became increasingly over the top, almost cartoonish in their severity. I remember writing a script about a wealthy, arrogant boss who constantly belittles his employees. My original ending had him losing his company due to his poor leadership and having to start over, learning humility in the process. Dhar's version? The boss not only lost his company but also his mansion, his car, and ended up homeless, begging for change on the street, only to be rejected by the very people he had wronged. More impactful, he'd say. Teaches a stronger lesson. I started to feel a knot in my stomach. It wasn't just about teaching lessons anymore. It felt like we were reveling in the downfall of others, creating a spectacle of suffering for entertainment. The turning point for me, the moment I knew something was fundamentally wrong, was a script titled Kid Steals Mom's Wallet, Instantly Regrets It. My original script focused on the boy's desperation, his immediate regret, and the mom's struggle to understand and forgive him, leading to a heartfelt conversation about trust and responsibility. It was a nuanced story about a family navigating a difficult situation. Dhar, however, had other ideas. He wanted the boy to not only steal the wallet but to use the money to buy an expensive video game console, flaunting it in front of his mom. Then the mom, instead of calmly confronting him, would stage an elaborate prank where she pretended to be terminally ill, revealing her dying wish was for him to return the money. The boy would then break down, confess, and she would reveal it was all a test. I pushed back hard. I argued that it was emotionally manipulative, that it would traumatize a child, and that it didn't teach a genuine lesson. It just taught kids that their parents might lie to them in extreme ways. Dhar, however, was adamant. "It's drama," he exclaimed. "It's compelling. It's what the audience wants." That conversation left a bitter taste in my mouth. I started looking at our videos differently. The comments section, once filled with positive messages, now had a growing number of viewers pointing out the increasingly extreme portrayals, the lack of subtlety, and the almost sadistic pleasure in watching the villains get their comeuppance. It wasn't about teaching anymore. It was about shock value, about maximizing views, about creating content that generated strong, often negative reactions. I felt like a cog in a machine that was slowly, subtly, becoming something I didn't recognize, something I couldn't be proud of. My creative soul, the very essence of why I got into storytelling, was being suffocated by the relentless pursuit of virality and the simplification of human experience into black and white morality tales. I was losing myself, and my art was being corrupted. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I saw the direction things were going, the escalating absurdity, the moral compromises. I felt like I was betraying everything I believed in as a storyteller. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have stayed, hoping to steer the ship back to calmer waters, or would you have walked away, even if it meant sacrificing your stable job? The next week was a blur of internal conflict. I tried to reason with myself, to justify staying. "It's just a job," I'd tell myself. "You're still writing." But the voice in my head, the one that remembered why I fell in love with stories in the first place, was getting louder. It screamed about artistic integrity, about the responsibility of a storyteller, about the potential harm in perpetuating such simplistic and often cruel narratives. I started discreetly reaching out to other writers, former colleagues, trying to gauge the industry landscape. It was tough out there, just as it had been before Dhar Mann Studios. But the thought of continuing to contribute to what I now saw as morally questionable content was becoming unbearable. Then came the masterpiece. This was the script that ultimately pushed me over the edge, the one that forced my hand. Dhar announced a new direction, a grand finale concept for an entire series of videos. He wanted to create a narrative arc, a multi-part story that would culminate in a single, epic Dhar Mann video. One that would be the ultimate lesson-teaching experience, the most viral, the most impactful. He called it the final Dhar Mann video ever, implying, of course, that it would be so definitive, so perfect, that it would transcend all previous work. My heart sank. I knew what this meant. It meant every bad impulse, every extreme exaggeration, every morally dubious plot point would be amplified to an unbearable degree. He gathered all the writers, producers, and even some actors for a huge brainstorming session. The energy in the room was electric, but for me, it felt suffocating. Dhar outlined his vision. A story about a young, ambitious social media influencer who built her empire by constantly stealing content from smaller creators, taking credit for their ideas, and gaslighting anyone who called her out. He wanted her to be the most despicable villain we had ever created. My stomach churned. I immediately saw where this was going. But then he unveiled the climax. The influencer would steal content from a struggling, terminally ill artist, an artist whose final masterpiece was her only legacy. The influencer would then attempt to profit off it, only to be exposed in a grand, public spectacle. But here's the kicker. The exposure wouldn't just be online. Dhar wanted the artist to physically confront the influencer on a live TV show, during a segment where the influencer was being praised for her originality. And then, in front of millions, the artist would reveal the truth, brandishing undeniable proof, causing the influencer's entire world to crumble, publicly, dramatically, and irrevocably. Her fans would turn on her, her sponsors would drop her, and she would be left utterly disgraced, destitute, and alone. I sat there listening, feeling a cold dread creep up my spine. This wasn't a lesson. This was a public execution. This was pure, unadulterated schadenfreude, disguised as morality. And the worst part? Dhar wanted me to write the final confrontation scene. He said I had a knack for emotional dialogue. I looked around the room. Some people were nodding, excited, discussing how many millions of views this would get. Others looked uneasy, exchanging glances with me. I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't write that scene. It went against every fiber of my being as a storyteller. It was manipulative, cruel, and completely devoid of the empathy I believed all good stories should possess, even those with clear villains. It would be a betrayal of my craft, a betrayal of myself. After the meeting, I approached Dhar in his office. My hands were shaking slightly, but my resolve was firm. I told him I couldn't write the scene, that it was too extreme, too vindictive. He looked at me, genuinely surprised. Too extreme, he scoffed. This is going to be our most impactful video yet. It's going to teach people not to steal, not to be selfish. I tried to explain my perspective, about the difference between justice and cruelty, between teaching a lesson and humiliating someone for entertainment. I talked about nuance, about the importance of allowing for redemption, even for villains, if only to show the complexity of human nature. He just stared at me, his expression hardening. "You're getting soft," he said, his voice cold. "This is business. This is what the audience wants. If you can't deliver, someone else can." That was it. That was the moment. The decision was made for me. I looked at him, at the man who had once inspired me, now just a ruthless businessman chasing virality, and I knew I couldn't be a part of it anymore. My passion, my art, my very integrity was on the line. I took a deep breath. "Then find someone else," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "because I'm not writing it. And in fact, I'm done. I can't be part of this anymore. I quit." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Dhar's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his face. I didn't wait for a response. I turned, walked out of his office, and didn't look back. The aftermath was complicated. My sudden departure sent ripples through the studio. Some colleagues expressed their support, privately telling me they admired my courage. Others kept their distance, fearing for their own jobs. Dhar predictably was furious. He tried to strong-arm me into signing an NDA, threatening legal action for breach of contract, claiming I had abandoned a project midway. But I had kept meticulous records of our conversations, of my objections, and of the increasingly dark turn the scripts were taking. I knew my rights. I refused to be silenced. The final Dhar Mann video eventually got made, written by someone else, someone who apparently had no qualms about writing a televised public shaming. It went viral, just as Dhar had predicted. Millions of views, thousands of comments. But interestingly, alongside the usual moral-learned comments, there was also a significant backlash. People called it excessive, mean-spirited, and even dangerous. Some viewers expressed discomfort with the level of public humiliation depicted, pointing out that it felt less like a lesson and more like a revenge fantasy. It seemed that even the audience, in some capacity, was starting to feel the same unease I had. As for me, leaving Dhar Mann Studios was terrifying. I walked away from a stable income, a well-known platform, and the security it offered. For a while, I felt lost. The job market for screenwriters was still as brutal as ever. I took on freelance writing gigs, anything to pay the bills, but I never stopped writing my own stories, the kind of stories I truly believed in. Stories with complex characters, moral ambiguities, and genuine human connection. It was a struggle, a constant uphill battle. There were moments of doubt, Moments where I questioned if I had made the right choice, if I should have just swallowed my pride and stayed. But then I'd remember the feeling in Thar's office, the sick dread in my stomach, and I knew, deep down, I had done the right thing for myself, for my integrity, and for the craft of storytelling. I wouldn't compromise my artistic soul for virality. And then something unexpected happened. A small production company, one that focused on independent, character-driven dramas, saw some of my personal work. They were impressed by my approach, my emphasis on nuanced storytelling, and my belief in exploring the gray areas of human experience. They offered me a position, not as a churn-out viral content machine, but as a writer who could help them craft meaningful, thought-provoking narratives. It's a challenging role, yes, but it's a place where I feel valued, where my creative spirit isn't just tolerated but celebrated. It's a place where I can finally tell stories that truly resonate with me, stories that aim to uplift and inspire, not through public shaming, but through genuine understanding and empathy. It's a place where I can truly be myself, and honestly, that's worth more than any number of viral videos. So that's my story. The day I walked away from the machine, the day I chose my artistic integrity over guaranteed success. It was a terrifying leap of faith, but looking back, it was the only choice I could have made. The final Dhar Mann video ever might have been a hit, but for me, it marked the end of an era, and the beginning of something far more meaningful. If you've ever felt that conflict between what you believe in and what you're told to do, then like this video if you were on my side. Subscribe for more stories like this, where real people face impossible choices and come out stronger on the other side. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. Do you think I made the right call? Or was I just being naive? I'd love to hear what you think. I'll see you all in the next story.